Attorney knows best. Intelligent interviews. Interesting insight. Intriguing information. Attorney knows best. Here's your host, Sean Bartley.
Attorney knows best. Susan and I go back many years. She was a big-time law student and a big-time lawyer, and she was a big-time law student at the Valparaiso University School of Law, where she graduated in 1999. She's also an alumni of a rival school now by the name of Indiana University.
Go Hoosiers.
The Hoosiers. They beat us in football this year. I wasn't too happy about that. I went to the University of Maryland. Susan has over, 21 years of practice experience now.
That's
She's
right.
a member of the Indiana bar, a member of the Florida bar, and she practices currently in Florida for a large law firm, and her issues range the gambit. But today she's going to talk about her experience in being a nonprofit lawyer, a nonprofit organizer, a nonprofit director. Today we welcome Susan Gainey. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Got some cheesy applause.
It's like I'm watching a football game. No
Right.
audience but the noise.
I know it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
My background.
Thank you for having me, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be here. We go back. Sean's always been a great friend, and I'm happy to do this for him.
Yep. You're originally from Indiana, but now you're located where?
Orlando, Florida.
And why'd you move to Florida?
Why not? I actually am originally from Florida. I'm from Tampa, Florida, and I grew up in Southwest Florida in a little town called Lehigh Acres, and went to Indiana and did my college there, and moved back for family.
Oh, cool. And so you're in Orlando, Florida now, right?
That's right.
What's the temperature like out there today?
Sunny, and I think it's like 70 today.
70?
Uh-huh.
It's like, yeah, overcast, and I think 30s or 40s here where I'm at in the DC metro area.
We were in the pool over the weekend, so not to rub it in or anything.
Whose pool? Your own?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah, I don't envy you, but DC, we're better.
Yeah, I love DC actually. So
lives close by. So
yes. You got the seat of authority right next to you. So
authority right next to it. Susan, why'd you decide to become a lawyer?
I like to argue. Anybody? I was on the debate team in high school, and it just seemed like a natural fit for me. I did pre-law at IU and Valparaiso, and just seemed like a natural fit for me. And so I enjoy argument, and anybody that knows me will tell you that.
So you knew early on that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I did, actually, many years later. And I didn't necessarily remember that, but many years later, a friend of my mom's came up to me at an event I was at and said, I remember you telling me when you were a freshman in high school that you were going to law school. And that's not something I necessarily remember, but I take the word for it. And apparently I knew as early as freshman year. Did
you have any experiences with lawyers prior to deciding that you wanted to be a lawyer, or just through your own study?
No, I actually, I have a pretty modest background as far as my mom's a teacher and my dad was in construction. So I really had no experience with being a lawyer. So I think it was just the experience of being on the debate team that intrigued me. And then I started looking into it from there.
In my own personal story, I never knew any lawyers and didn't get to know any lawyers until about, I think my senior or junior year of college. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. I had something to do, but I didn't go to law school right away. Did you go to law school right away after undergrad?
No, I actually took a year off. Like I said, I had modest background. And so I took a year off I worked 3 jobs and saved money. I didn't have the money. So, but for, student loans and scholarships and grants and things of that nature, I wouldn't have been able to go to school. So, but I took a year off to just work and save money to go to law school.
Did you work in a law firm?
I did. I worked at legal aid this between college and law school, and then I worked as a server bartender, and then I also babysat during that year off.
Okay. And then you decided to go to law school in between that year off, or did you defer or go right away?
I always knew I wanted to go to law school. It was just a financial issue for me. So so I just worked and saved money, and then I went.
Yeah, the finances of law school are
Mm-hmm.
something that a lot of people aren't ready for. There's some people who can just write the check and go. And then for many of us, we have to manage the idea of going to law school and the finances involved with it.
Absolutely.
I did much like you. I took some time off, figured it out, and then went to law school later. And then you chose Valparaiso University School of Law. Is there any particular reason why you chose Valpo?
I went to, it was a smaller school. I had come from a big university, IU, as you've mentioned. And so I wanted the dynamics of a smaller law school for that experience. And it was just well received as far as their experience with Supreme Court justices. I had, you may have had the same experience at Valpo too, but I had the opportunity to meet 3 Supreme Court justices when I was at Valpo. We had a dean at the time, and this may have been I know you're behind me, but Dean Gaffney had had a lot of experience with Supreme Court justices. So I met Justice Gingsberg, I met Justice Thomas, and so I had the opportunity to interact with them in law school.
Yeah. Professor Gaffney, I would always call him Dean Gaffney. He had a remarkable ability to connect and make friends in high places.
Yes.
And he would never reveal how he was making friends.
We don't want to know.
Yeah. And during law school, I had an argument with him about the ethics of newspaper reporters and how they were unethical. And we were in a seminar class, and he made me go get he made me go research the ethics of journalists. And I went to the American Journalists Association, something like that, and printed out the ethics rules that journalists had. And I went one by one through each ethic and told them how journalists violated. I gave them specific experiences with regards to the African-American experience and how journalists violate.
Yeah. And that was before social media and the extremes that we have now as far as, far left and far right journalists.
Everybody in the class got an A and I got a B+.
That sounds about right.
But Professor Gaffney was was a great resource, a great opportunity. He met the Supreme Court justices. Did you get a chance to have any dialogue with them one-on-one?
I actually did. I was over in Cambridge when Justice Ginsburg, she taught a class over there.
She taught a class?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because her first question, I remember she asked, and it's a justice of the Supreme Court. We're sitting there as law students and we're afraid to say anything. So Professor Levinson, I don't know if you remember her, but she knew me well. And so she calls on me to answer the first question that Justice Ginsburg asked. And I was like, oh, man. So fortunately, I did know the answer. So I was able to answer the question. And then Justice Thomas, he was at a reception, and I have a photo of him. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I think
it was a moot court competition he made.
Yeah, I think so.
1L at the time, I think.
Yeah, there's a photo out there of me and him talking about something. I'm sure it was something very, very, something legally related and very interesting. Or we could have been talking about football, whatever.
I don't know if Clarence knows football.
Yeah, I don't think Clarence knows football either.
He's probably angry.
Yeah.
But I like Killer Star and Thomas, so let me not knock them too much.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
But so how'd you enjoy your time in law school after, taking into consideration the size of the school, the location of the school, which was close to your home?
Yes.
How would you describe your experience?
First year was really, really hard, and meeting new people and trying to, do well, and how law schools teach is extremely hard, as far as you're petrified all the time. As far as make sure you do your reading, it's a lot of reading and stuff. So first year was pretty hard. The second and third year, I remember them being fairly easy.
Really?
Yeah, because I think I just get settled in. I mean, it was still hard given that it was law school, but by that time we'd met people and had the study groups and did the reading and stuff. And by the third year, you gain that confidence, and so you're much more confident in your abilities after the
I
first year.
remember your confidence. I was intimidated by you.
Oh, stop. Well, they teach you that first year. When you were first year, I was second year, so I was
Right.
sharing my confidence with you.
Right. Yeah, your confidence in it. And then after law school, what did you do next? Graduate?
Yeah. I had the opportunity to go in the JAG Corps. I decided against it. Was accepted. Was all through the process. I know, right? And then I got a great offer from a law firm, and decided to go the private route instead of the government route, and started practicing at a law firm, and did that for the next 10 years.
What was your focus?
I did defense litigation. So businesses get sued, I defended them.
Were you representing the businesses on behalf of the insurance company?
Yes.
Or okay.
Business defense and insurance defense.
So did you sit first chair?
Yes, I had the opportunity to sit first chair in multiple trials. I started practicing in a smaller town in Evansville, and they just, for whatever reason, I know it's more unusual now to get lawyers fresh out of law school to get that experience, but for some reason, I don't know if it was the time, and we were trying a lot of cases, so I sat first chair within, I think it was 6 months or so after graduating.
Wow.
I mean, I had someone there overseeing me in that first trial, but I basically did it by myself.
What was the fact pattern? Do you remember?
That was an insurance, a premises liability case that we were representing on insurance defense. I lost, so that taught me a lot. They hated my client. That was the biggest lesson. And as a matter of fact, the judge told me that, the jurors told me that afterwards. So my life lesson in that is always make sure the jury likes your client. Otherwise, nothing else really matters. But I was fortunate after that and tried lots of other cases where I had some really good verdicts. So defense verdicts.
How do you get a jury to like your client?
How do you get them to like them? Just being humble. It was a business owner that I was representing, and he was very arrogant. As a matter of fact, one of the court staff told me that they probably inappropriately looked at some of the jurors' notes that had been disregarded. They had some unkind words to say about my client. Wow. And so that was a lesson that I've taken with me, of course, for the next 20 years was, make sure that you're very humble and they like your client. And I was fortunately on the opposite side of that, where I was representing a business owner and the jury loved my client. And I was actually a plaintiff in that case, and they gave him a very large award. So a lot of times it comes down to that.
And the large award that you won?
What's that?
Can you talk about that case and the large award that you won?
Sure. It was a business litigation workers' comp type case, and it was a situation where my small business client had believed that he had secured insurance, paid for the insurance for workers' compensation, and ultimately he was injured, and the insurance company came back and said, no, you didn't have insurance to cover that. So we sued the insurance company and went to verdict, and they would never offer any settlement at all. And we took it to verdict and got a $1.5 million award. So
there was no offer of settlement.
Zero.
You went to trial. How long was the trial?
It was 5 days.
5 days.
4 or 5 days.
And you got, for our listeners out there, for a lawyer to win a $1.5 million verdict when the offer for settlement is zero is a major accomplishment. Congratulations. Thank you.
It was also a smaller jurisdiction. So a lot of times, particularly now I'm practicing in Orlando, you see the personal injury awards all the time where we got $10 million from my client, et cetera, et cetera. So it was interesting that they awarded exactly like to the penny as to what we asked for. So back to what I was saying earlier, they really, really liked my client. He was very humble. The facts were there. And so they gave him exactly to the penny what we asked for.
When you have a 5-day trial, what amount of preparation goes into it? So like, let's say there's a 5-day trial. Each trial day is like 6 to 5 hours long. How many hours would you put in for a trial that lasts about 30 hours?
Yeah, so the trial itself may be 6 to 8 hours for the time you're in the trial, but every day there's something new or different that pops up. And so trial days are usually at least 12 to 16 hour days. And then going up into that, you start, of course, years before. What I tell my clients a lot of times is, although that most cases don't go to trial, I think the statistic now is less than 5%. We prepare every case like it is going to trial. So we're talking about years of preparation. And then right before the trial, as a matter of fact, I was scheduled to go to trial a couple weeks ago. It got vacated because of COVID, but the days leading up to that trial, you're putting in pretty long days, 12 plus hour days.
When the occurrence happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the client says, hey, I'm injured and I want to be compensated. How long from the injury date, the hiring the lawyer date, to the trial date usually occurs? Like, what's the time period?
I would say it depends on the jurisdiction, federal, state, and then also the local jurisdiction. So, for example, and also COVID has put everything behind. I just got a trial date that was September of 2022 for an incident that happened earlier this year. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 years, I would say.
1 to 3 years. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that these verdicts and the success of a trial is a year process. It's seldom when the case resolves quickly. Have you ever had a case resolve quickly?
Yeah. I mean, if you file
As a plaintiff.
What's that?
As a plaintiff.
As a plaintiff, yeah, sometimes if it's just a matter of getting some paperwork and stuff together. I had one that just resolved fairly quickly, that they sued the wrong defendant. So I contacted opposing counsel and say, hey, you got the wrong person. And they agreed and dismissed within a few weeks. So,
wow.
So very rare though. Usually it takes at least a year.
That would happen. And then you get a settlement offer because your plaintiff has been so wronged that they just want to fork out cash. It's seldom, if ever, happens. They usually fight to reduce the amount that your client is genuinely due.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of plaintiff's work. I did for a period of time, but generally you have to establish your damages. That takes depositions, that takes subpoenas, things of that nature. So it's fairly unusual to get a quick settlement. Usually it takes at least a couple months. Right.
I know one of the areas that is near and dear to your heart is nonprofit law or not-for-profit law. Is there a difference between nonprofit and not-for-profit?
Potato versus potato, tomato versus tomato. So it's essentially the same thing. It's just how you want to say it.
So you've started several successful nonprofits and 2 you're intimately involved with. Can you share about those?
Yeah, so back in 2010, I was essentially working part-time as a lawyer. And so I started 2 non-for-profits or not-for-profits. And one is a animal rescue, no-kill animal rescue. And then the other one is a support system for Kenya, which is I'd taken a sabbatical and spent some time in Kenya. And so I started Friends of Doggo, and with the help of others. And then It Takes a Village, no-kill rescue, also with the help of other people.
So the no-kill rescue, let's talk about that. During COVID-19, my wife had a great idea to adopt a puppy. My daughter had been asking for a puppy for a long time. And even before the puppy craze kicked off during COVID-19, the first weekend of quarantine, when our kids were out of school, we acquired a little puppy, a beagle named Maisie. And we worked with a nonprofit to adopt Maisie, now our family member. What's the name of the nonprofit that you founded? It
Takes a Village.
It Takes a Village?
Mm-hmm. It's based on the concept that there's an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. And so we came up with that it takes a village to help animals. And so It Takes a Village, no-kill rescue.
Why did you decide to start It Takes a Village, no-kill rescue?
Need. At the time, I was living in Evansville, Indiana, and there wasn't a lot. There was one organization that had been around for a while, but the need to help homeless animals was much greater than the available rescues. And so a group of us got together, and it just kind of took off from there. We started rescuing, and it just grew and grew and grew, and now it's an established rescue. We actually just celebrated the 10-year anniversary. And has about 15 employees. And so it grew from just a group of volunteers just helping pull animals from the shelter to a business that's been around for 10 years.
What role did you play in the start of the nonprofit? No Kill?
Well, yeah, keep in mind, again, I was working only part-time as an attorney. And so I wasn't being paid at the time, but it was just working 12-hour days, just everything. And so when people, a lot of times they want, let me start a nonprofit. It is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, as they say. It's a lot of work. And it's 24/7 as far as, particularly when people have a need, and we get calls. We just had Christmas and New Year's. We're getting requests for help Christmas, New Year's, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, all the time, early morning calls. And so for people that are interested in starting a nonprofit, you need to make sure that you have the time commitment to commit to doing that, because it does take a lot of work.
Can you take us through the steps and the paperwork in starting a nonprofit? Now, you mentioned that you were with some volunteers when you started a nonprofit. Did you have the idea, or did someone else have the idea and enlist you to help them?
We actually just started working with our local animal control. And so it was primarily a small group of us. There was about 3 or 4 of us, including someone who has since passed away. And so her and I basically just had a meeting and said, okay, we need to kind of formalize what we're doing. At the time, we were just going into our local animal control and pulling animals. And so particularly when you're dealing with government entities, they require it to be just a more formal process, instead of just, Joe Schmo walking in and taking an animal. And so the process is really, really. And so the process is really to establish with your local secretary or your state secretary of state. For us, it was Indiana. And then eventually you want to establish your 501c3 status with the federal government.
So what type of organization, like what type of business structure would an individual need to form to create a nonprofit?
You have to file both Indiana and Florida are like this. So, and most Secretary of States are similar. Based on my experience, you have to establish a board of directors. You have to establish, get your account set up with for tax paying purpose. So your taxpayer ID for the nonprofit. You have to have bylaws, and then you have to have a certificate of founding, basically, and you have to take all the paperwork and file it with your Secretary of State in order just for the state to recognize you as a nonprofit.
Right. So are there particular corporate entities that are preferred over others? Like, is a nonprofit an LLC or an INC?
It's an INC.
And so you can't have a nonprofit with an LLC, correct?
No, it has to be a corporation. It's a not-for-profit corporation. I imagine there's, I'm not an expert in that by any means, but all the nonprofits I've worked with, you'll see they'll have their name as like Where It Takes a Village, Inc. or Friends of Doggo, Inc. And so you establish yourself as a not-for-profit corporation.
When you did the bylaws and the incorporating documents for It Takes a Village, were you the primary attorney drafting all the paperwork?
Yes.
And do you think a layperson could have done it without you?
I think so. With the internet, just the founding documents, you can really just. I do recommend getting an attorney just to make sure everything's created properly. And so if people are interested in doing a nonprofit, hopefully you can find a volunteer attorney to look over things. I do that for some other organizations as well. Here in Florida, just recently in the last year, I've helped do look over the founding paperwork for 2 other nonprofits. So it's great if you can find an attorney, and there's lots of attorneys, even for my board. We have other attorneys that are on the board that are out there and wanting to help. And so I recommend an attorney, but if you really don't have anybody that you can consult with, I think you can probably, a layperson could probably do it if they do their research on the internet.
Well, it's been my experience that lay persons don't do a bang up job or perfect
Yeah.
job doing it, and sometimes unraveling the mistake and curing the problem that a lay person has created is more difficult than hiring an attorney up front. I think your
That's right.
Take the Village probably was wildly successful because the founding documents and paperwork were created by you, the attorney. When you chose your initial board of directors, who were you looking for? Were they the volunteers themselves, or did you look outside the organization?
When we initially started, the board of directors consisted of the people I was telling you about, the original people that were just volunteers going into going into animal control and helping animals. So, but if you're starting out, and as a matter of fact, I was just corresponding with someone last week that's looking for a board of directors. If you don't have people already in mind, you definitely want it, like I said, an attorney, an accountant, people like someone that's in marketing. You want to try to target those people, and so that your program can be successful as well, and making sure that you have people that can bring something to the table.
Right. The organization It Takes a Village has been around 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And are you still running the organization, or is it operating successful without you?
It's operating successfully without me. I still am a consultant. And so we have an executive director and a board of directors, and when I moved to Florida a couple of years ago, we set it up so that it can be sustainable. That's another reason why you want to have attorneys involved initially, so that there's a good transition of power if that becomes necessary, and that the organization itself is sustainable. So you don't want an organization that's just around one person. So while I certainly was an asset and continue to be an asset to the organization, if God forbid I get hit by a Mack truck tomorrow, you don't want the organization to fall apart, and no organization wants that. And so that's why it's very important to have a board of directors, executive directors, and so as it stands now, I still offer consulting services and legal advice and help with operational issues, and I attend the board meetings for It Takes a Village, but it is sustainable without me.
So you did something that's incredible, is you help found an organization that is sustainable and still existing without your primary contribution, attendance, and day-to-day operations. I think you pointed out something that's really significant and something that the IRS looks at with regards to tax-exempt status. We'll get to the IRS in a moment. But they want to make sure that you're not propping up an organization to benefit yourself and receive tax-exempt status.
Absolutely.
To the detriment of the community. Can you talk about the process in getting approved by the IRS and what you had to do?
Well, again, I would recommend getting an attorney for that, because it is particularly, IRS has different levels of tax exempt status. There's for smaller organizations. So if you don't think I think it's $50,000. If you don't think your organization, maybe it's 25. But anyway, if you don't think your organization is going to raise money to that specific threshold that they've established, then you can file an easier paperwork. But most organizations, they hopefully are established with the thought that you're going to continue to grow. And so It Takes a Village. We started with literally nothing. As a matter of fact, I personally loaned. I was paying all the initial filing fees and things of that nature. And so now we're a business that we have a $500,000 budget. And so you want to get an attorney, because there's specific language that you need in your 501c3 filings in order for them to approve the paperwork. And so definitely you need to make sure that if you don't have an attorney consulting on that or doing that for you, make sure that you're looking for that specific language that's required in order for the application to be approved. And so if you're filing for the longer 503 status, C3 status, then you certainly want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. And it's very paper intensive. And so you certainly want to make sure you do that. You also want to make sure that you paper everything as far as financials. As you mentioned, Sean, the IRS is hypersensitive to that, as they should be, and as the community should be. They want to make sure that that, if I donate $1,000 to an organization, it's not going to buy someone a boat or things of that nature. And so you need to make sure that you have a very detailed accounting for where all the money is going. And you also want to make sure that you file your paperwork every year. If you don't, not an association I'm associated with, but another organization I'm aware of, they didn't file their proper paperwork. And after 3 years, you lose your 501c3 status if you don't file the proper paperwork every year with the IRS.
Have you had the occasion where you had to save a nonprofit or advise on the nonprofit how to maintain their 501c3 status?
I have the organization I was just referring to. Again, I was not associated with them, but I had offered assistance in order to kind of help save them. Another organization that I'm currently consulting with is not, I wouldn't say save, that's a pretty strong word, but I'm helping them make sure that they have all the proper paperwork for filing.
Right. In my experience, we had to do some unraveling for 501c3 corporation where an individual had a buddy who was a lawyer, but wasn't experienced in securing 501c3 status from the IRS. And 501c3 is a provision of the United States Tax Code that allows organizations to operate and generate I don't want to use the term income, but generate funds for the purpose of carrying out a mission.
Mm-hmm.
Goal is not income producing. So in the case of It Takes a Village, your purpose was to meet community needs with regards to fostering pets, caring for pets, and adopting pets. And there was a benefit that was going to be bestowed upon the community, and that you weren't doing it for a profit status, kind of PetSmart or Pet Value, who adopt out pets, and they do it for a certain intent, and that intent is to generate income. Your institution was designed to benefit the community, and the IRS wants us to engage in things that benefit the community, and so they give tax-exempt status. And what that means, tax-exempt status means what?
It basically means that you are recognized by the IRS as a legitimate organization for tax purposes. And it's really only that. So two things about that. One is that just because an organization is a 501c3 doesn't necessarily mean that they're completely legitimate. Probably means they're completely legitimate, but for a war story on my end, I was serving as a volunteer prosecutor on animal cruelty cases.
You're a prosecutor too?
Yeah.
Wow.
And an organization had their 501c3 status, but they were also hoarding animals, and so I helped prosecute them. They had she because it was essentially just one person, and she had went out and hired a lawyer and got her 501c3 status. But then she started hoarding animals. And so that's my little word of warning to even though an organization is 501c3, you still need to make sure they're legitimate. Again, nothing I was associated with, but we had about a year ago a situation where the executive director of a 501c3 was basically, taking money from the organization. And so 501c3 means they're legitimate, but it doesn't necessarily mean for the IRS, but you still need to do your homework and make sure that they're properly using funds, and also in the case of animal rescue, not hoarding animals. The lady I'm referring to had almost 100 animals, and she was prosecuted for animal cruelty, and successfully, I might add. And so that's what 501c3 status means. So make sure that even if someone claims they're 501c3, that they're still a legitimate organization. The other point too is that, in my opinion, it is essential to be recognized as a 501c3 if you intend to get any type of grants, large donations. Most grants, when you're applying for those, they do require 501c3 status. So it's essential, but also if you're supporting a 501c3, make sure that they're still legitimate in their operations.
And only the IRS can give you 501c3 status, correct?
Correct, which is separate from the state, your state recognizing you as a nonprofit organization.
Right. Let's talk about money in 501c3. You have a wildly successful 501c3, or you were a part of a family member of a 501c3. You don't own it. Nobody owns it. There's
Correct.
no shareholders, right?
It's governed by the board of directors.
Right. And you all now have a coffer of $500,000. Talk about money. How does a nonprofit organization garner money from interested people, raise money, and what are your duties with regards to managing that money?
You again, back to the 501c3 status. Most big donors, government agencies, grant people that fund rescues and our nonprofits require 501c3 status. So It Takes a Village is community supported, which means that we don't necessarily get a lot of grants. We do get some, but it's really just people making smaller donations. And so I would say that as the board of directors and as the founder or the president, executive director of a nonprofit, there is what we call legal terms, a fiduciary duty to make sure that you, in fact, are appropriately using that money for the nonprofit's purpose. And so you do that by making sure you have a very, very detailed accounting. And for the rescues and nonprofits I've been involved in, there is an accounting literally for essentially every penny. So someone comes in, makes a $20 donation, then there's an accounting for that. We know who made it. We of course it's deposited, and there's record of the deposit. We like to do cashless a lot so that there's always a paper trail. And so if we go out and buy dog food, for example, for the dogs, we tend to do cashless, and so that there's a bank accounting of what the money was used for. And so that's another recommendation. If you're involved in a nonprofit, make sure that there is an accounting for as much down to the penny as you can possibly have an accounting for.
Right. The IRS scrutinizes the taxes of nonprofit organizations. Correct?
Correct. Nonprofits have to file what's called a 990 every year. And as I said earlier, that if you don't file the 990 within 3 years, you lose the 501c3 status. And you definitely do not want to be in that boat, because you essentially will lose all credibility if you have your 501c3 status and you lose it. Right.
The 990. And I think there's a provision where you have to post or make available the 990 for community inspection, correct?
That is correct. 990s are public. You can do it in various ways. Some nonprofits put it on their website. Others just make it available for public inspection. So you should be able to, any nonprofit, walk in their doors and say, let me see a copy of your 990, and they should be able to provide it for you.
Now, It Takes a Village is located in Evansville, Indiana?
That's right.
Evansville. If someone wanted to adopt a pet or family member from It Takes a Village, who would they contact and how would they go about it?
The website is itvrescue.org. And so you really, and we adopt all over the country.
itvrescue.org.
As in It Takes a Village, itvrescue.org.
Okay.
And so go online. If there's a pet that you're interested in, then certainly most of our adoptions come in the tri-state area of Kentucky, Illinois, and Indiana, but certainly we have had adoptions as far as way actually in Maryland, and
Wow.
as far as way as Seattle. And so when people really want a dog, then or a cat, and we find a means to get it to them.
That's great. Let's talk about your other nonprofit that you helped found and established. I think it's called Friends of Doggo.
That's right. So Doggo is a community in Kenya where I volunteered. I told you I took a sabbatical from my law practice, and I went and volunteered at a community center orphanage in Western Kenya. The village is called Doggo. And so when we came back, I helped found that in order to provide education scholarships to community members over there. Basically, the situation in Kenya is such that if you don't have money to pay for schooling after the 8th grade, then you're finished. And so particularly for girls, that typically means they get married off, they get pregnant. And so the government only provides education up to 8th grade. And so what we started was primarily an educational program and also a community support program in order to provide education to villagers in Western Kenya.
Is that nonprofit established here in the United States?
It is. So we went, the procedure I was talking about for It Takes a Village was the same procedure in order to raise money for Friends of Doggo. So we established with the Indiana Secretary of State, and we got our 501c3 status with the IRS. And that can be the case. I mean, you could support programs all over the world, but so there's no legal requirement that the funding stays here in the United States. You just have to follow all the same procedures in accounting and making sure that the money's properly used for your stated purpose.
And is Friends of Doggo still around, and are you still?
It is, yeah. It was a smaller nonprofit. It was not as big as it has a budget that's less than 50,000, so it's not as big as It Takes a Village is.
Mm-hmm. Now, talk about the nuances in having a nonprofit in the United States and then serving communities outside the United States. How's that done? Is there any special thing that you need to consider?
Well, before we all became familiar with Zoom and it became more readily available, communication a lot of times was an issue. So the village the Doggo village is a remote village, and so they don't have internet access per se. And so communication was an issue there, as well as just actually transferring the money in order to pay the school fees. And so that took some logistical problems and issues. And so we had to work on things like that in order to make sure. And I'm sure people that work with developing countries all over the world can understand those issues. It's not, they don't have all the luxuries that we do here in the United States.
Now talk about the board of directors for Friends of Doggo. Are the board of directors for the Friends of Doggo all United States based, or are there people? Okay.
Yeah, but we work with people there in the community that we have meetings with on a regular basis in order to, we certainly don't. We want to make sure that we're doing sustainable things to meet their needs and not doing things that we think they need. And so we're in regular contact with community members in order to see what their needs are.
Well, share a success story with regards to Friends of Doggo. So Friends of Doggo is established to help further the education of a person beyond 8th grade in Kenya. Do you have any success stories you'd like to share with us about that?
One of the things that I'm really proud of with respect to Friends of Doggo is that it was we started the educational program and it's grown in order to into other needs, including things like deworming for kids and providing medical services for the kids and things of that nature. So we started that in 2009, Friends Doggo, and we started with the providing high school, and so a lot of these kids have gone on to go into college. We started a college fund have graduated from college now and are now working in the community themselves. One of the people that we originally supported, he now helps run another one of our partner organization, the Weiss Scholarship Fund. He helps run that organization. And so that certainly is a successful story that someone we sponsored to go to college is now helping other kids in his community go to college as well.
Did they go to college stateside?
In Kenya, yes.
In Kenya.
Yeah.
Have you had anybody come over to the United States and go to college or high school?
Not yet. Maybe. Again, that's just we're a smaller organization, so that there's a financial aspect to that of being able to afford U.S. universities, but not yet, but maybe one day.
Can you give me an example of the types of education opportunities that you provide the children in Doggo?
We offer support for the community. There's community school that's actually there in the community, but
so the kids have to actually pay to go beyond the 8th grade.
Right. And so up until the 8th grade, there is a community school there, but it's literally, the type that doesn't have good school desks and doesn't have, has the old chalkboards and no internet access and mud floors and no doors on the doorways, things of that nature. And so we do our best to help provide support for that, including we tried to even provide them the basics like book bags and paper and pens and things of that things. One story, when I was one of the times I was over there, we bought, there's 350 students in the community, and we bought book bags for all of them. And I remember just the joy in the students' faces because we were pulling the items out. So it was paper and pens and stuff. And so they were cheering for every single item that was being pulled out of the bag. And so I've never in my life seen kids cheer for pencils. And that's essentially what they were doing. We provided them socks and things of that nature. And every item that was pulled out, it was just this big, huge cheer, like they were all being given, I don't know, a PlayStation or something like that. And so just to see the joy in their faces to be so grateful to have pencils given to them. And so, but then, like I said, up until 8th grade, then we have to provide full boarding school support for them so that they can continue their education. So we try to support the local community as well as community school up until the 8th grade, and then also boarding school after the 8th grade.
One of the things I really like about your work in your nonprofits is that you're a founding member and they were of particular interest to you, and they were not necessarily law related. There's something law related because you helped found the organization, and your know-how and your skills and training allowed you to found organizations that are thriving, they're doing well, they're still in existence, and they're viable without you. But one of the things I always point out to people is that lawyers are transcendent. We can learn anything. And another thing that is important about lawyers is that we're well balanced and we do something other than the law. And talk about being well balanced and doing something other than your workaday job with the nonprofits.
Yeah, and so the two nonprofits, they were really just passions for me. They had really nothing to do with law, and particularly when we first started, people would ask me, for example, with It Takes a Village, they would ask me, animal related questions or vet related questions. I'd be like, I'm a lawyer. I don't know what's wrong with your dog. But I learned, and I think that's that's the great thing about lawyers. We're adaptable, and so when I'm starting something, about Kenya, other than visiting there on sabbatical, I didn't know anything about Kenya. But we listen and we learn. And so I certainly encourage anybody, lawyer or not, to make sure that you try to follow your passion. And so, and while I still love the law and practicing, those were my passions. And so I started doing those things as well in order to do something that was of interest to me.
Right. And I think that, I know that one of the things about my experience in law school and my experience in practice is that, based upon the critical thinking skills that we develop and the reading comprehension skills that we develop and the ability to relate things that otherwise seem unrelated to problem solve are invaluable. And so I know your organizations are thriving because you were involved at the inception, and you remain involved as a board of directors.
Yeah, I think we also learn how to exactly echo everything you say, that as far as problem solving, and then try to as calmly as we possibly can handle problems that arise. And so that's certainly a challenge a lot of times when you're dealing with nonprofits and rescue in particular. People are very passionate about their animals. And so, my training as a lawyer helped me to try to deal with problems as they came about, and as calm as I certainly can be passionate as well, but to try to analyze problems and handle them and address them appropriately instead of going crazy about some issue that has arisen.
Now, people are very passionate about their pets and very passionate
Certainly.
about animals. I think that the human connection to a pet is different than the human connection between ourselves. Like the love that I feel for my dog is different than the love that I feel for my children, because my children are human and the dog is not human. And so there's a different kind of feeling that the dog gives me than what my children and wife give me. I don't want to prioritize them for everybody, but for me, obviously my family matters more than my pet. But some people, put pets and human on the same level because they're both life forms. Taking into consideration the feelings people have for pets and how people can often place pets or the animals that provide us love in the same status of humans. There was a controversial case many years ago with a great football player named Michael Vick. And Michael Vick was involved, obviously, with animal abuse and dog fighting. He served his time. He's out. How would your organization handle someone like a Michael Vick who was involved in the abuse of animals?
I think with respect to the Michael Vick case, and you were certainly correct, people are very passionate. When I was serving as a prosecutor, the prosecutor told me that, he handles murder cases and rape cases and child abuse cases, but he doesn't get as much feedback from the community as when there's an abuse case.
Wow.
And so, I think
animal abuse case.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to diminish those very important cases that are in our criminal justice system, but I think that it's probably because, just exactly like you said, that people have a connection. Most people have, at some point in their life, have had either had an animal or had experience with an animal. And so I think that's why people get so passionate about it, is because they think of, when they see those animal abuse cases, they think about their own, your beagle or my border collie, or, and so we that's why I think
beagle is better than your border collie.
No, I don't think so. But anyway, with respect to the Michael Vick case, certainly it was egregious, and he absolutely should have been convicted. I think that Michael Vick was probably a product of his environment. For myself, I was never raised around dogfighting, and certainly I'm not justifying that as well. But in certain communities, dogfighting is acceptable. And that doesn't make it right, but that's what they grew up with. Michael Vick, I think he served his time, and as I understand it, he is now advocating for animal rescue, and seems to have been rehabilitated. And so I think that people still hate Michael Vick, to this day. And I'm just,
my opinion is he did his time.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things we can agree on, Sean, is that I'm in the boat that, if they are truly rehabilitated, they've done their time, and now they're trying to remedy and educate, then more power to them. The opposite side of that is that hoarding case that I told you about, where the lady had almost 100 animals in just absolutely deplorable conditions. She did her sentence, 2-year sentence, and she's back doing it. And so that's a different case. She has an illness, and she didn't get help for her illness.
Is she incarcerated?
No, because animals are property, and it was different for the Michael Vick.
She was just hoarding them. She wasn't actually fighting them or physically abusing them.
Which was different from the Michael Vick case. Also, it was a state versus a federal case, but nonetheless. And so I think that when people are truly rehabilitated, and I would say this about any crime, and they try to remedy their mistake, then we should give them the opportunity to do so.
I agree.
We agree on something political?
For those of you that don't know,
oh no, here we go.
I have a private Facebook page, and I don't let many people on it because I tend to be right about a lot of stuff, and people who are right with me gang up on people like Susan who are wrong about a lot of stuff. But God bless Susan, she does not comment because she doesn't want to be assaulted by those that are right.
Yeah, and I rightfully point out how wrong you are on your page.
My podcast, or the podcast Attorney Knows Best, is not about politics. It's about people and gleaning as much information I can from those people so that we can help one another.
And I believe I asked a specific agreement with you, Sean, beforehand that we'd not discuss politics.
Oh, I would never discuss politics. I mean, it doesn't matter anyway. I mean, at the end of the day, we're both lawyers. We're on that same side of the fence. We know best. If people have a problem and they need it remedied, the best way to get it remedied is go to a lawyer. Don't rely upon self-help. I mean, when you start a nonprofit, sure, you can do it on your own, but are you looking at like immediate formation? Or are you looking at long-term success? Are you looking at adding to your coffers, taking in donations, be accountable, filing the right 990, doing everything that the IRS requires so that you maintain your tax-exempt status and you hire a lawyer. My political views have nothing to do with what he knows best. And I appreciate you, coming on today. I think a lot of people are intimidated by me, number one, because I got a big voice. And number two, I like to type in all caps. I've been typing it in all caps all my life. And it's like, oh, you're typing it in all caps. You're yelling. I'm like, no, my voice is actually loud. And if I yell, people start calling 911. But yeah, so the Michael Vick situation, it's controversial. I mean, there are people on either sides of the aisle that hate Michael Vick still and don't want him, have any chance to participate in our economy or be employed. But he did his time, albeit he was associated with dog fighting. I detest dog fighting. I would never do it. I don't even like other dogs to bark at my dog, but that's their natural behavior. Fighting is not their natural behavior. Biting is a natural behavior, but being combative for the leisure and pleasure of man is not their purpose. And so I can see why people are mad at him. But at the same time, he did his time, and now he's advocating on behalf of organizations like It Takes a Village. Is It Takes a Village affiliated with any larger organizations, ASPCA or anything like that?
Best Friends in Utah. So It Takes a Village is a no-kill, which means that it has a 99.6% survival rate. And so we don't euthanize for space. And so Best Friends is the largest no-kill rescue in the United States. And so we are an affiliate of Best Friends.
Does Best Friends lend any money to your organization or help support its fundraising goals? Yeah,
so their support is structural as far as helping with promotions and paperwork and things of that nature. So they do have grants available. We have not yet secured a grant from them, but we certainly there's another group called Maddie's Fund, which provided mini grants to us. And so there's lots of organizations. ASPCA, we actually just got a $5,000 grant from the ASPCA. So the larger organizations, I know a lot of people are a lot of times like, oh, support local. And I certainly do support local, but the national organizations, they have a purpose as well. And so
advertising, marketing.
Absolutely.
Message. Right.
Absolutely. And grant, as I said, since Best Friends is a national organization, they provide services to us. And so certainly adopt local, but I personally support the larger organizations as well.
Speaking of larger organizations, is there any conflict of interest that the nonprofit could run into with the larger organizations providing structural support and or grants?
I don't really think so. Just as long as you're being, of course, the larger organization, they have much larger budgets and they have staff and attorneys and things of that nature. So, if there's a conflict, I suspect that they will point it out, but we haven't, It Takes a Village hasn't had any conflict with working with any of the larger organizations.
In concluding, do you have any funny lawyer jokes, you being the lawyer? You heard it? I never get offended by lawyer jokes. I always think they're funny.
Yeah.
No funny lawyer jokes?
I really don't. Do you?
No, I mean, everybody up. No.
Yeah, everybody hates lawyers.
Time to time, I'll hear a funny lawyer joke and I'll laugh, and somebody goes, "You're laughing at the lawyer joke?" And I go, "Yeah." And they go, "Why?" I said, "Because it doesn't apply to most of us."
That's true.
Most of the lawyers are good people. They start nonprofits and they help people start nonprofits and they help maintain nonprofits. Is there anything you'd like to ask me that I could answer for you about being an attorney in my practice or this podcast?
Since we're kind of talking about nonprofits, is there a nonprofit that you're particularly passionate about?
Well, as a matter of fact, I am, and I happen to be chairman of the board of a nonprofit that's $20 million. I don't get paid a dime.
Wow, you made my $500,000 budget look
and it's an amazing, $500,000 is still a big number. It puts you in an exclusive group of nonprofits. I mean, having $500,000 and, to operate with, that's amazing. But it's called the Primary Care Coalition, and we deal with public health initiatives and public health clinics. And, speaking of politics, some people say, how could you be involved with a public health organization? And I say, it's easy. And when I applied to be on the board of directors, and that's how I got involved with the nonprofit, a friend of a friend asked me to come on. They were looking to diversify their board. They knew me from another board. And so anything that has to do with the education of a child or the health and protection of a child, I would very much like to be a part of it, because I know the benefit of a good education and I know the benefit of good healthcare, because I was a military brat, and those are things that we didn't have to worry about when I was growing up as a kid. So it's called the Primary Care Coalition. I'm very passionate about it. And from time to time, people really don't understand public health. They look at it as a quote unquote government program. But now that we're in the midst of a pandemic, everybody's concerned about public health,
Sure.
government doing its part to make sure that the private citizens are healthy, and they're leaning on the government and requiring the government to step up and help and make us safe and or healthy and protect us. So I'm particularly passionate about that, and I do a lot of work with them. And it's kind of like day-to-day operations of a nonprofit is different than board membership.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to address that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I absolutely would like to address it. So a lot of people think that not-for-profit or nonprofit means that they don't have employees and they don't make money per se. Well, we're still a business, and so any nonprofit still needs to make money. They just don't. Their goal is not to make a profit. They're not a for-profit business. They provide a service. But every service, like you said, your nonprofit is $20 million. I mean, it takes money to operate a business, even if it's not for profit. And so I think a lot of people mistakenly believe that nonprofits can't have employees, or they're supposed to be all volunteers. And while most nonprofits certainly sustain themselves with volunteers, particularly when you're dealing with larger nonprofits like the one you consult with. You still have to make money, and fundraising is a primary objective because you need the money in order to provide the services. And so certainly, and then also on the point of you talking about diversifying the board, if you're associated with a nonprofit, certainly, and since the podcast is Attorney Knows Best, you really, really, really want to try, if you can, have an attorney serve in some capacity on your board. And I work with just started working with another local nonprofit here, where I'm just a consultant for them. I didn't have the time capacity in order to be a full board member, but they called me a few days ago, and they're getting ready to submit some legal paperwork. Wanted me to review it. I reviewed it, gave them a little bit of advice, and then they submitted the paperwork. And so if you're involved in a nonprofit, please make sure that you have most, like Sean pointed out, most attorneys, they're looking for something to do in the nonprofit. We're not all bad, and the lawyer jokes and the reptiles and things like that. Most attorneys would love, and as a matter of fact, every attorney in my firm that I am aware of serve in some capacity in the nonprofit sector, whether it be on the board of directors or consultant. It takes a village. As a matter of fact, our chair of our board of directors is an attorney. I'm an attorney, and we also have a third individual that's a consultant for the board of directors who is an attorney. And so certainly try to get an attorney on your board of directors, because it's invaluable when you're submitting and reviewing paperwork, things of that nature.
Great. You shared a lot of great information today that I know will be helpful to people looking to start a nonprofit and people considering whether or not to hire an attorney to help them run the nonprofit. More importantly, found the nonprofit and file the appropriate paperwork to get nonprofit status. It's not always easy getting nonprofit status. I like to point that out because I've had the occasion of trying to help somebody reclaim their nonprofit status and they never followed through. The IRS was very amenable to them getting the nonprofit status. They just had to do the things appropriately, which required the skills of a knowledgeable attorney.
Yeah, I, as best I remember, when I did the 501c3 for both of the nonprofits, it took me probably 30 plus hours to, and it's not only the application itself, but it's getting the paperwork together for the application. And so, it is certainly something that I would recommend having the advice of an attorney. If not prepare it, at least look over the paperwork to see if there's any changes that need to be made.
So in conclusion, I know you got to run and I took up a lot of your time and I appreciate
That's
you.
Okay. I'm happy to be here.
If people want to donate to It Takes a Village Rescue, how would they donate?
So itvrescue.org. You can do it online. Friends of Doggo is friendsofdoggo.org. And so, again, tax deductible. And so that's again, the importance of doing the 501c3 status, particularly when you're dealing with big donors. Someone donates $20, they may not necessarily care about getting it as a write-off on their taxes. But for large donors, they absolutely care about having the tax benefit of making a large donation. So also, as with my nonprofits, make sure it's easy. So you can donate online. We accept PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, any make it easy for the people to donate because the $5 donations, they add up and they're just as important as the $500 donations over time. So make sure that you're making it easy for people to donate to your nonprofit.
If someone would like to contact you and or your firm with regards to securing a lawyer to help them with the nonprofit, how would they go about contacting you?
My firm is dsklawgroup.org. My email address is sgainey, SGAINEY at dsklawgroup.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about establishing a nonprofit or the law or anything or just to chat. I'm always available and happy to chat. Great.
Thanks for coming on Attorney Knows Best. If you need help in your nonprofit or you need an experienced litigator and you're in the Orlando, Florida area, or you're in Indiana, I'd ask that you contact Susan Gainey, Esquire, attorney at law extraordinaire.
You're kind. Thank you, Sean.
I mean, and another thing I'd like to point out, if you need an attorney who's going to know what they're doing and know how to serve clients, you always want to contact the lawyer that went to the Valparaiso University School of Law.
Absolutely.
Without question.
Or Indiana University. I have a degree there too. So I got to give it a little plug for the Hoosiers also.
Oh yeah. You were a professor at IU for a while. Right?
I have my LLM from IU and I was
your LLM.
I was a professor at University of Evansville.
Oh wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
LLM. What was your LLM in?
International law.
Oh wow. So you know Mr. Strobel from Valpo, right?
Sure.
That was our guy. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, Sean.
Really appreciate it.
I enjoyed being here.
I'll see you next time. And
all right. Thanks. Bye.
Attorney knows best. Intelligent questions. Interesting interviews. Informative insights. Attorney knows best. Attorney knows best.